At the edge of a small Midwestern town, the decaying church of St. Aurelia still loomed over a field of wild grass. They said that more than a century ago, the villagers knelt within its frigid nave and struck a covenant with the devil to escape famine. Each soul offered was sealed inside a candle, and the altar became an orchestra of silent screams. Though the church has long been abandoned, whenever the wind cuts across the plain, a faint yellow light still flickers through the shattered windows. And people believe that if a foolish hand ever dares to spark a flame again, the covenant will rise. And whoever lights, it will never leave hope. Ali, wow. Nathaniel pulled his car to a stop along the muddy road, his eyes fixed on the massive shadow rising from the field of wild grass. St. Aurelia Church. The stonework lay in ruins, its roof collapsed in jagged gaps, yet it still radiated a grim, funereal majesty. He opened the door, and the early autumn wind rushed in, cold and damp, carrying the scent of mildew and rust. Nathaniel was a scholar of folk religion. He had heard dozens of rumors about St. Aurelia, where, long ago, the villagers forged a dark covenant in exchange for survival. Most dismissed the stories as superstition, but he did not. In an old library in Chicago, he had unearthed a tattered manuscript that spoke of the breathing candles of this very church. From that moment, obsession clung to him, driving him here. Stepping through the rotted wooden doors, Nathaniel felt at once that the air had thickened, as if he were stepping into the chest cavity of some colossal beast. Each breath grew heavy, each footstep stretched into echoes that refused to die. He swept his flashlight across the nave. There, on the altar, dust lay thick, except for the faint marks of fingers pressed recently into its surface, withdrawn in haste. A gust of wind tore through the church, the doors groaning. And for an instant, Nathaniel was certain he saw a faint glow at the far end of the nave. He blinked, and darkness returned. His heart pounded. Nathaniel drew out his recorder, his voice whispering into it. St. Aurelia, Day 1. I can feel a presence here, and I believe the candles remain, waiting to be lit. Behind him, the darkness seemed to whisper back, soft and sibilant, in a tongue that did not belong to man. No. Nathaniel moved deeper into the nave, his flashlight sweeping across damp, moss-cloaked walls. The air grew heavier, choked with mildew and the acrid tang of old ash. He stopped at the altar, brushing a hand across the thick blanket of dust, then froze. A rustling noise echoed from the far end of the church. His chest tightened. The beam jerked wildly. A shape darted between the ruined pews. Who's there? Nathaniel's voice cracked, trembling against the silence. The shadow suddenly lunged forward. Nathaniel staggered back, pulse hammering, nearly dropping his light. The beam caught a face, haggard, familiar. Eyes bright, hair unkempt, a camera swinging from his neck. Eli? Nathaniel gasped, scarcely believing. The other man stiffened, then let out a shaky laugh. Nathaniel? Christ, I thought you were something else. The tension eased for a heartbeat, though the dread clung stubbornly around them both. Eli Turner, an old friend, once a fellow traveler on field expeditions, was here, inside the rotting shell of St. Aurelia. What are you doing here? Nathaniel asked, voice low. I could ask you the same. Eli raised his camera and snapped a photo. They say this place is haunted, I figured I'd see if my lens could catch anything strange. Didn't expect to find you chasing whatever dark faith you're still obsessed with." Nathaniel didn't answer. He only gestured at the altar. "Do you see it? The wax stains. They've never really gone out." Eli frowned, half skeptical, half uneasy. But before he could reply, a sharp crack rang out, like flame catching a wick. A faint, sickly glow flickered across the altar. A lone candle shivered into flame, though Nathaniel knew he had not touched it. Shadows stretched long and jagged across the ruined walls. Eli lowered his camera, his face gone pale. You see it too?" "Yes," Nathaniel whispered. Wind shrieked through the broken windows, splintering into a chorus of whispers. They swirled around the two men, hundreds of voices rising and falling in a tongue that did not belong to this world. Every syllable scraped at their skin, raising gooseflesh. Eli gripped Nathaniel's shoulder. We should get out, now." But Nathaniel shook his head, his eyes alight with fevered conviction. "No, Eli. This is the proof. The covenant never ended, don't you see? They sealed their souls into these candles." The single flame flared violently, casting light across cracked walls. Within those fissures, Nathaniel thought he saw faces, dozens of them, pressed against the stone, their mouths moving soundlessly. Eli turned away, hands trembling around his camera, no longer daring to press the shutter. Silence thickened. Then came the sound of wax dripping, tick, tick, like blood falling onto the cold stone floor. Eli edged back. "Nathaniel, if you still have any sense left, we should leave before—" His words cut off. The entire nave erupted in light. Dozens of invisible candles roared into flame, their jaundiced glow painting the fractured ceiling. In that glow, shapes coalesced, pale figures lining the central aisle, standing as though in a funeral procession that had never ended. Nathaniel clutched his recorder tight. Eli swallowed hard, eyes wide in horror. Both men knew in that instant they were no longer observers. They had become unwilling guests at a ritual that had never ceased. Now! The jaundiced glow of dozens of candles filled the nave. Their light gave no warmth. Instead, it chilled Nathaniel to the marrow, as though he were standing inside a morgue. Eli gripped his arm tightly, eyes wide, no longer curious but stricken with absolute terror. Along both sides of the aisle, hazy figures began to stir. They had no faces, only man-shaped husks wrapped in wax, chests hollowed inward, arms curled tight like melting effigies. Each movement cracked and splintered like brittle wood. One figure broke away from the front row. The flame on the altar candle bent toward it, as if feeding it with breath. Layer by layer, its skin peeled away, revealing a glistening, pulsing substance beneath. Nathaniel and Eli watched as the thing warped, flesh winding and knotting into the form of a living candle. Its arms stretched into waxen branches split with fissures, and from its mouth spewed molten wax, hissing as it struck the stone floor. Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. Eli let out a strangled cry, stumbling back against a splintered pew. His camera slipped from his hands and shattered on the stone, forgotten. The flesh candle flared, a crimson flame erupting from its brow. Its light made the other figures quiver in unison, as though awaiting command. From its warped body came a groan, layered, 100 voices weeping at once from a single throat. "Oh God, oh God," Eli whispered, clutching Nathaniel's shoulder. But Nathaniel could not look away. Terror bound him, yet some dreadful fascination held him still. He listened and realized the groaning carried words. Not random sounds, but names. The names of Saint Aurelia's villagers, one by one, called from the dark. Another candle on the altar flared to life. A second figure stepped free, its skin cracking, wax pouring down its body. The stench of burning flesh rolled through the nave. Eli gagged, pressing his hand to his mouth to keep from vomiting. The whispers swelled, clearer now, their chant unmistakable. More to be lit. New blood for the light. Nathaniel fumbled for his notebook, scrawling frantic notes with a trembling hand. Eli snatched at it, hissing, "You're insane. This isn't something to record. It's something to escape." But before their argument could rise, the two flesh candles lurched forward. Beneath their feet, wax sizzled like acid, eating through the flagstones. A droplet spattered onto a fallen pew. Within seconds, the wood sagged into ash. "Run!" Eli screamed. They bolted down the narrow aisle, the sickly glow dogging their steps. Nathaniel slammed into a crumbling wall, his hand striking a small wooden door. Without a thought, he shoved it open. Both men tumbled inside and wrenched it shut behind them. The small chamber reeked of scorched wax, heavier than the air outside. Their breaths rasped in their throats, seared as though they had swallowed fire. Nathaniel's flashlight swept the room, then froze. Before them lay a circle of candles, dozens of them, encircling a stone altar. But these were no wax tapers. Each was a human finger, bone and flesh fused together, fingertips burning with steady red flame. Eli broke into sobs, voice trembling. "Nathaniel, this isn't a covenant. This is hell." Outside, fists pounded the door. The flesh candles had found them. The flames atop the altar suddenly roared skyward, illuminating ancient sigils carved into the walls, a curse that had never been broken. And in that moment, Nathaniel understood. They had not stumbled upon a relic. They had awakened a covenant that promised no escape. Yee! Footsteps thundered through the darkened church. Nathaniel dragged Eli forward, breath ragged, the stench of burning wax clinging thick in the air. Behind them, the wax figures dragged themselves across the floor, hissing softly like candles cracking as they melted. They burst into the confessional, only to see the walls splitting, wax seeping through like congealed blood. A hand seized Eli's shoulder. Nathaniel swung his flashlight like a club, shattering it, and pulled his friend onward. The nave yawned open before them, and the scene had changed. Every pew was filled with waxen shapes, all heads turned toward the altar. Upon it stood a single colossal candle, burning crimson, its light bleeding across the stone like liquid fire. Before it, a melting priest shape preached, voice booming against the fractured walls. The covenant has never ended. The flame must be fed with souls. The heat scorched their skin raw. The congregation of candles began to rise, staggering forward, limbs splitting, their bodies dripping foul black resin. Nathaniel clenched the drawings in his hand. The ink had bled scarlet, revealing a sigil of a broken candle beneath the altar. His mind reeled with clarity. The only escape was to shatter the seal. "The crypt beneath the altar!" he shouted, dragging Eli through the swaying throng. The wax creatures grasped at them, shells splitting, oozing a stench of rot and ash. At the altar's base, Nathaniel's palm found a hollowed stone. He pressed hard. The floor trembled, splitting wide to reveal a spiral staircase plunging into the depths. The priest's shape roared. From the great red candle lashed tendrils of molten wax, cracking down like whips, searing the air inches from their heads. Without hesitation, Nathaniel and Eli hurled themselves down the stairwell, heat pursuing like a living tide. Darkness thickened around them until, at the bottom, a monolithic stone door loomed. Carved upon its surface was the image of an inverted burning candle. From its fissures seeped the sound of countless voices, whispering, sobbing, cursing, begging. The door groaned as it began to open. A cold wind surged through, snuffing out the light behind them. Nathaniel felt the pull of inevitability. Beyond this threshold lay the true heart of Saint Aurelia, where the fate of the covenant, sealed for centuries, would finally be decided. The stone door shuddered open, and darkness surged out like a flood of ice. Nathaniel and Eli stepped inside, their hearts pounding in their chests. Beneath their feet, the floor was split with jagged fissures, from which oozed thick, red wax, like blood boiled into liquid. At the chamber's center rose a colossal candle, vast as an ancient tree. Its flame burned crimson, casting a sickly glow across the cavern. Around its waxen trunk were fused human forms, mouths frozen open, eyes dripping like molten wax, their bodies rigid yet trembling as though still alive. From them came low, overlapping moans, a grotesque chorus of suffering. Eli staggered back, voice trembling. Nathaniel clutched the drawing, the sigil of the broken candle glowing like a wound. He understood. This was the root of the covenant. The blood candle, devouring the villagers' souls to fuel the sect's unholy power. As long as it burned, the ritual would never end. "We have to extinguish it," Nathaniel whispered, though his breath shook with fear. They stepped forward, but the priest's voice echoed from every wall, thick and dripping like wax. "None shall break the covenant. This flame is your blood." The monstrous candle flared, tendrils of red wax uncoiling and lashing down. They wrapped around Eli's legs, dragging him toward the trunk. He screamed, thrashing, but the wax was as unyielding as iron chains. Nathaniel lunged, pulling desperately, but the candle clutched tighter, hungrier. "Go!" Eli shouted, eyes wild with both terror and resolve. "You have to destroy it, even if I don't make it." Nathaniel shook his head, tears brimming, but Eli shoved him hard toward the flame. In that instant, Nathaniel understood. Only a final sacrifice could end it. Eli lifted his face, his eyes gleaming in the hellish red light. "End it." And then he let go, surrendering himself to the candle. His body was swallowed whole, the flame surging higher with a shriek that rattled the earth. The chamber convulsed. Nathaniel seized the moment. He tore the last relic from his pack, a flask of sacred oil scavenged from the archives, and hurled it into the heart of the fire. A deafening roar split the air. The blood candle screamed, fissures ripping through its body as imprisoned souls burst free, wailing in a torrent of cold wind. The light collapsed into itself, plunging the cavern into utter blackness. When Nathaniel awoke, he lay among the rubble, outside Saint Aurelia. The night sky loomed above, moonless, silent. No Eli, no moans, only the crushing stillness of a grave. He staggered to his feet, his hands caked in hardened wax, a mark that would never fade. The crypt, the candle, all gone, along with Eli. But deep within the silence, he caught the faintest whisper riding the wind. The covenant is not finished. Nathaniel shivered. Somewhere, in the shadows of Appalachia, the blood flame still waited for another sacrifice to awaken it once more. Pixie. In an isolated town of the American South, a fanatical religious community lived by the pages of a single scripture they believed to be divine. But the holy book had warped, its letters twisting like flesh and blood. Each time it was read aloud, it brought not salvation but horror. Joints sprouting from the wrong places, skin rotting away, eyes bulging from their sockets. And when the moon shone down on the rotting church, the grotesque truth was revealed. Their God was no deity at all, but an ancient parasite, feeding through every prayer, waiting to claim as its next host anyone foolish enough to draw near. Jonah Lawson drove along the dirt-red road, flanked on both sides by shadowed swamplands where daylight barely slipped through the trees. The silence was so heavy that the faintest sound, the fall of a leaf, the drone of an insect, echoed like a drum inside his chest. He had come here to investigate a rare religious community, whispered about in chilling rumors, an isolated town, bizarre rituals, and strange bodily deformities that plagued its believers. The village emerged like something abandoned by time. Weather-beaten wooden houses leaned under peeling paint, their windows coated with layers of grime. The people watched him pass with hollowed, stone-worn faces, their voices coarse as if scraped down to rock. Jonah felt as though he had crossed into another world, one where ordinary rules no longer applied. At the town's center stood the old church, its structure corroded from within. The wooden doors hung half open, leaking faint light, and the stench of melted wax mixed with something rancid and decaying. Jonah stepped inside, heart pounding. In the gloom, splintered pews lined the floor like broken teeth. The altar was crusted with dust and hardened wax, and yet, lying upon it, rested the community's only surviving Bible. Inside, a cluster of worshippers knelt on the floor, murmuring prayers. Jonah's breath caught when he noticed. Their skin split into jagged cracks, new joints bulging at unnatural angles, some eyes swelling grotesquely from their sockets. Yet, none of them cried out. Their voices droned on, steady, reverent. Each verse echoed through the church like invisible blades, slicing into flesh, and the convulsions of their bodies became part of the chant. Jonah staggered back, horrified. These mutations were not accidents, not illness. They were the direct consequence of the scripture itself. Every word recited was a knife, every prayer an incision. To the townsfolk, it was a miracle of God. But to Jonah, it was something else. A parasitic force, ancient and unholy, twisting bodies through its scripture. His flashlight caught the Bible on the altar. The letters writhed across the page, trembling and curling like veins under the skin, the sheen of dried blood clinging to the ink. A chill surged down his spine. He realized he stood in the heart of a grotesque covenant, an ancient pact festering behind this community's faith. Jonah inhaled sharply, forcing himself to stay calm. But his pulse hammered on, a frantic reminder. He had crossed into the territory of something older than God. where scripture was not salvation but infection. And he knew, one wrong move, one stray syllable uttered aloud, and he too could be claimed as the next vessel, doomed. Jonah pressed himself into a shadowed corner of the church, eyes fixed on the preacher holding the tattered Bible. Its rough, blistered pages glimmered with a sickly red glow from the wax. The preacher's raspy voice rose and fell, merging with the faint groans of the kneeling worshippers, creating a grotesque, almost symphonic chant. A woman kneeling near the altar suddenly convulsed. The skin on her arm split open, revealing dark, raw flesh beneath. Jonah's heartbeat spiked. Before he could make sense of it, an old man beside him whispered, "Do not fear, it is the blessing of the Lord." But Jonah could not look away. With each verse, joints twisted, ribs stretched in unnatural ways, eyes bulged or swelled grotesquely, their bodies warped, yet their voices droned on. No screams, no pleas. Sweat and congealed blood mingled with the reek of rot, thickening the air into something suffocating. A moment later, the preacher turned toward Jonah, his eyes glinting with fervor. "You wish to hear as well, don't you? You want to understand the power of God." His tone rasped and cracked, but each word carried a supernatural weight, pulling Jonah in. Jonah trembled, but could not step back. He saw the writing on the page shift, the letters writhed like snakes slithering across the parchment. As the preacher read on, Jonah's body burned. His hands went numb, as though something inside was clawing for release. He stumbled back, but the floorboards quivered, and the congregation crept closer in unison. Their groans merged with the preacher's chant, the rhythm pounding against Jonah's skull. A strange sensation spread through him. His skin prickled, then turned numb. Jonah looked down. His knuckles twitched. His thumbs seemed to swell and split from his hand, as if a new joint were forming. In a heartbeat, he felt something alien threading through his veins. It wasn't pain. It was worse. A vile vitality taking root inside him. In the wavering glow, Jonah saw the others, deformed yet upright, mouths reciting scripture, eyes gleaming with twisted ecstasy. He realized this Bible was no vessel of salvation but a tool, an ancient parasite invading flesh, word by word, prayer by prayer. Sweat and blood dripped from his brow as he steadied himself. He knew one moment of weakness, one slip into the rhythm of those words, and he would no longer be human. In the chorus of groans and the preacher's rasping voice, Jonah understood. If he wished to survive, he would have to trace this rotten scripture back to its root. But here, every step was peril, every breath a potential offering to the ancient power that already ruled the faithful. Shah. Jonah could retreat no further. The stench of rot, dried blood, and burning wax pressed against his lungs, choking him. Each step seemed to sink into the rotting wooden floor, while the groans of the deformed worshippers merged with the scripture, a grotesque chorus not meant for the living. He noticed a small trapdoor beneath the altar. One brick was loose, revealing faint light spilling from below. On its surface, words had been carved, glowing faintly red like clotted blood. Jonah inhaled sharply, his trembling hand pushing the hatch open. A rush of cold air escaped, thick with decay. Yet underneath it, something pulsed with life. Descending, Jonah saw them. Countless half-rotten corpses still moving, their flesh sloughing away in wet strips. Eyes bulged from sockets, joints had sprouted extra hinges, skin peeled in ragged patches. A suffocating dread weighed down on his spirit. This was not illness, not ritual, but the direct handiwork of the ancient parasite. He staggered back, but the figures advanced slowly. Their whispers invaded his head. The scripture wasn't just on paper. It lived across their skin, etched into blood and bone, spreading through every breath. Each word was a root piercing into Jonah's flesh, making his skin sting, his joints ache, his blood clot beneath the surface. Jonah quivered, but forced himself to hide his fear. Observing closely, he realized these abominations retained a twisted consciousness. They murmured verses, howling with a mix of agony and ecstasy, eyes lit with an unnatural black glow. The parasite used the holy text as a tool of hypnosis, turning every believer into a living host, sustaining its existence through generations. Above, he heard the creak of collapsing boards, the preacher and his flock preparing the nightly ritual. Jonah knew this would be greater than anything before, something meant to unleash the parasite across the entire town. He had to escape, but every step risked attack. The corpses seemed to track him, ready to pounce at the slightest movement. He slipped deeper into the cellar and discovered a storeroom filled with old scripture pages. Many were caked with dried slime, their letters writhing faintly as though alive. Jonah flipped one page and felt a stabbing under his skin, as if the words themselves were burrowing into him. The verses crawled, hissing against the paper, and his heart clenched with dread. This parasite controlled everything through the book, through each syllable spoken aloud. Suddenly, a corpse reached out and touched his shoulder. Jonah flinched, blood rushing to his face. In a blink, the creature pulled back, but in his mind echoed a hideous moan, rotting scripture threading itself through his thoughts, verse by verse. He swallowed hard. Unless he destroyed the root of this corrupted Bible, the entire town and himself would be consumed as hosts. He froze in the cellar, eyes fixed on the stairway above. The ritual was about to begin. The faithful still believed this was a miracle. But Jonah knew the truth. The miracle was rotten from the inside out. If he did not act now, the parasite would spread unchecked, reshaping every living body into its brood. Below, the corpses moaned, the scriptures writhed, and Jonah understood. There was only one path left, to face the source of the rotting covenant directly, or die as its next vessel. No. Pull now. Jonah crept up from the cellar, every step echoing inside the decaying church. Above, enormous crimson candles bled their light into the suffocating air. The congregation was gathered, kneeling, their eyes gleaming with grotesque rapture as they muttered scripture under their breath. The preacher stood at the pulpit, his ragged voice booming. "Tonight, the Lord will bless us, through every soul offered." As his words fell, a slick tide of red wax oozed from the altar, curling around the worshippers' feet. Their skin shriveled, their limbs sprouted extra joints, eyes bulged from sockets, yet their mouths kept chanting, their voices unwavering, as though hypnotized. Jonah crouched in the shadows, sweat soaking his brow. He realized the parasite was no longer confined to their flesh. It saturated the entire church, seeping into the very air, lacing itself into every breath, every heartbeat. A chill swept through him as his own skin prickled, muscles tightening painfully. One worshipper staggered toward him, brushing a hand across Jonah's shoulder. Instantly his joints twitched, his skin swelled, nerves flared with agony as though something inside was splitting him apart. The groans of the congregation merged with scripture, pounding against his skull, dragging him to the brink of panic. The preacher sneered, his eyes blazing crimson. "You are the chosen. You shall become the final vessel to complete the covenant." Jonah knew then there was no turning back. They bound him to the altar, where beneath the wood and stone pulsed a massive mass of slime. Covered in weeping eyes and moaning mouths, its body throbbing in rhythm with the recited verses. Each word clung to Jonah's flesh, burrowing into bone, searing his skin, knotting his limbs into grotesque shapes. Blood thickened beneath his skin, bones strained as though sprouting anew. He screamed, yet consciousness lingered, long enough to understand that the parasite did not want his death. It wanted his body, alive, to be the seed for its spread. In one desperate, lucid moment, Jonah looked upon the deformed husks surrounding him, their chanting rattling in his ears. He made his choice. Straining against the ropes, he toppled a great candle, spilling fire onto the writhing red wax below. Flames roared upward, shrieks of scripture twisting into a chorus of agony as the entire church convulsed. The blaze consumed everything. Smoke choked the air. The warped faithful flailed in torment before collapsing into ash. Jonah crumpled, the stench of burning flesh filling his lungs as the last flame sputtered and darkness swallowed the room. But from within the ashes, a faint whisper lingered. The covenant is not broken. A warning that the parasite had not been destroyed, only silenced. For now. Nay. Ash choked the air, the acrid stench of smoke clawing into Jonah's lungs. He lay face down on the damp earth, sweat mixing with soot, hands trembling. The inferno had gutted most of the church, but the whispers lingered, soft and relentless, threading through his mind. The twisted husks of the faithful had withered in the blaze, yet Jonah knew the parasite was not destroyed. It had seeped into the ashes, into the half-burnt scriptures, waiting for a chance to bloom again. A prickling numbness spread through his body, skin cracking dry, limbs curling tight, heart hammering against his ribs. Every breath was a reminder that his life was being gnawed away from within. Forcing himself upright, Jonah fixed his gaze on the fragments of charred scripture drifting in the pale moonlight. His act had stopped the great ritual, sparing what remained of the town, but the cost was unbearable. Part of him was already infected, his hands roughened, bone pushing unnaturally against skin. He whispered to himself, as long as I breathe, as long as I remain myself, I must keep it from spreading. Yet, even in that rare silence, a long, worming murmur seeped out of the ashes. Rotted verses, writhing, curling into his ears like a hymn of horror. The flames had died, but the parasite endured. In dust, in paper, in every grain of ash. It had not been destroyed, only waiting for another body to claim. Jonah stumbled out of the ruin, his feet sinking into the wet soil, moonlight glinting on drifting motes of ash. The town was silent, as if nothing had happened. Yet he knew the parasite was still watching, still threading through every shadow. He was the only survivor, but also a carrier, marked by the covenant scar. The others were gone. The church lay in smoldering ruin. Jonah stood amidst the wreckage, staring up at the moon, crushed by a loneliness deeper than death. His survival was a hollow victory, haunted by whispers that refused to fade. He closed his eyes as pain lanced through his veins. He had lived, but part of him was forever altered, scarred by the parasite's touch. And in the southern night, the whisper of the rotten scripture lingered, faint, ceaseless, a warning that the covenant had never truly ended. Wah. In the quiet woods of Vermont, a family moved into a cheap wooden house, believing it would mend the fractures left by years of exhaustion. The scent of old ash clung to every grain of timber, and the slanted walls seemed to be listening. At night, the house groaned as though something shifted within its very bones. Footsteps echoed from a hallway that did not exist. Beyond the window, a flickering light revealed the silhouette of another house, one that had burned to the ground decades ago. Yet it seemed still alive, still waiting for them to step inside. The narrow dirt road leading to the old wooden house seemed swallowed in mist. Tires crunched over layers of rotting leaves, leaving behind damp, faded tracks. The house appeared, small, yet heavy, sagging as though burdened by winters that had never truly ended. Its dark roof was mottled, its wooden walls bleached gray by wind, its windows jutting out like hollow, sunken eyes. Outside, the silence was so complete that the only sound was the wind threading through the trees, carrying with it the chill of decayed earth. The husband lingered on the porch, sensing a stifling presence in the air, as though the house were not empty at all, but waiting. The wife trailed behind, her eyes sweeping over every detail, half eager, half wary. Their daughter hurried ahead, feigning indifference, but her gaze kept darting toward the shadows that pooled in the cracks of the shutters. Inside, the smell of old ash mingled with mildew, thick and clinging, as if a fire had only recently been extinguished. The wooden floorboards groaned underfoot, the sound echoing unnaturally long for an empty room. On the right wall, a charred stain spread, gray-black, like a handprint pressed into the grain. A hallway stretched forward only to end abruptly against a blank wall, senseless, like a doorway that had been sealed shut. The wife froze, fingertips brushing the cold timber, feeling a hollow resonance from the other side. The window looked out toward the forest, but the view bent and warped like a fractured mirror. For a fleeting second, the dim reflection showed not the empty yard, but a long dining table, chairs gathered around it, an oil lamp flickering above a meal already set. When the wife blinked, only the thick canopy of mist-shrouded trees remained. That first night, the creaking never ceased, chairs and tables shifting in rooms that did not exist. Footsteps padded softly down the hallway, stopping just behind the sealed wall. The husband reassured himself. It was only the old house settling. Yet at times he felt cold breath grazing the back of his neck, though every window was shut tight. The wife lay still, listening to the faint clink of a spoon against glass echoing from nearby, a sound that rang once, then faded, leaving silence heavier than the dark itself. In the attic, dust lay thick, but small footprints pressed clear trails toward a corner where no exit existed. In a crumbling notebook found in a drawer, shaky handwriting scrawled a few desperate lines. The second house they never left. The page was torn, the ink blurred as though by tears. The house fell quiet again, but it was a silence damp, oppressive, swallowing every breath. And somewhere beyond the sealed wall, a faint sound stirred, the scrape of a chair being pulled out, ready for a guest who had just arrived. Nya. Morning crept in slowly, its pale light swallowed by the thick veil of mist, leaving only scattered beams filtering through the windows. The wife tidied the living room, her hands carefully moving each worn object. Beneath the dusty rug, the floorboards revealed deep scratches, long grooves as if chairs and tables had been dragged across the wood. The marks were so fresh that tiny splinters still clung to them, as though someone had moved the furniture just the night before. The daughter wandered down the hallway, her gaze settling on a round window. The glass was cloudy, yet when she stared into it, the reflection was not the familiar room behind her. Instead, she saw another space, a long dining table draped in white cloth, chairs neatly arranged, oil lamps glowing invitingly. Faint silhouettes gathered around, their heads tilted as though in conversation. She raised her hand to the glass, but the surface was icy cold, reflecting only her own uneasy eyes. When she stepped back, the vision vanished, leaving behind only the cracked pane and its gray dust. On the second night, as the house fell still, the strange sounds rose again. The clink of spoons against glasses, the scrape of chairs dragged over wood, the muffled hum of a feast that never ended. Footsteps crept along the hallway, stopping just behind the sealed wall. A soft knocking began, measured, patient, as if someone were trying to open the door long buried. In the bedroom, the husband gazed into the mirror, weary eyes fixed on his own reflection. But for an instant, he was no longer alone. Behind him, the dining table shimmered into view. Chairs filled, shadowy figures lifting their glasses. They had no faces, only blurred voids. A pale hand rested on his shoulder in the glass, but when he turned, the room was empty, the mirror reflecting only his solitary frame. The wife could not sleep. At midnight, she wandered the hallway. The floor bowed gently beneath her steps, creaking like a heavy breath. She froze when she saw that the end of the corridor seemed longer than before. A door had appeared there, black, without a handle. As she approached, the narrow crack revealed only a fathomless dark beyond. From inside came whispers, layered voices overlapping, calling someone's name. She shut her eyes, and when she opened them, the wall was solid again, unbroken, as if nothing had changed. The next morning, the daughter sat quietly with her sketchbook. On the page was a drawing of their house, but inside it brimmed with chairs, lamps, and faceless guests. Their eyes were blank hollows. She shaded the doorway heavily, scrawling 2 words across the bottom: "Come in." Later, the husband searched the basement for tools. The dim light spilled over rough stone walls, where the floor was stained with old blackened ash. Sifting through it, he found a half-burned slip of paper. The trembling handwriting read, "They are still waiting at the table." By the third night, the house itself shuddered like a creature stirring awake. The lights flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally, the hallway lengthening with each passing minute. Laughter echoed faintly, distant yet growing clearer, as though the feast beyond the wall was reaching its liveliest moment. And from the depths of the dark came a drawn-out sound, scraping through the silence, the slow drag of a chair being pulled out, waiting for a new place to be filled. Morning came, but the light was too weak to chase away the chill. Inside the house, the space itself seemed to have shifted, though no one had touched a thing. Small objects, a stool, an old picture frame, a forgotten book on the table, moved subtly from their places. At times, they returned facing the wrong way, as though someone had used them and then set them back, but not quite right. The wife stood frozen in the living room. She watched the curtains stir, though no breeze passed, and beyond the glass appeared again the shadow of a glowing room. Inside it, the long table was now heavy with food, empty glasses raised in a silent toast. The faces remained pale and blurred, yet their presence was sharpening, growing more defined. When night fell, the sounds no longer came in scattered fragments. but in a relentless chorus. Footsteps circled the hallway, doors slammed from beyond the sealed wall, breaths seeped from imagined cracks. When the wife stepped into the corridor, she found it stretching farther than before. No wall stopped her this time. At the far end stood a strange wooden door, slightly ajar. From within, a fathomless darkness exhaled cold air that wrapped around her. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure moving in the shadows, but when she blinked, it was gone. Only a flat, silent wall remained. The daughter sank deeper into restless dreams. In them, she sat inside the other house, the one bathed in light. Around her gathered faceless guests, laughing, pouring wine, striking spoons against glasses in a celebration that never ended. Beside her, a seat was always kept empty, waiting. Each time she hesitated, laughter echoed, urging her to sit. When she woke, the sound of clinking glasses still lingered in her ears. The husband, desperate for answers, pored over architectural sketches he had found in the town library. There, he saw what could no longer be denied. This house once had a twin built alongside it. Decades ago, a wildfire consumed the other, yet its foundation was never unearthed. The final note from the architect chilled him. The two cannot be separated. One gone, one remains. The remaining will forever seek the one it lost. When darkness descended again, the house trembled faintly, like the beat of a heart. Shadows stretched long, clinging to the floor, as if trying to climb upward. For a fleeting moment, the family felt it together. They were no longer the owners of this place. The house was expanding, plank by plank, wall by wall, making room for another presence to press in. And somewhere in that deepening dark, another chair scraped back, pulled out, waiting for the one who had just been chosen. Ninda, Namd. Night fell faster than usual. The last light of dusk was swallowed whole, leaving a dense darkness pressing in around the house. When the yellow ceiling lamp flickered on, it sputtered, its glow shivering as if being consumed by something unseen. The hallway now stretched unnaturally long, its damp, mottled walls carrying the weight of centuries. The wife pressed her face to the window pane, and this time it was no fleeting vision. Across the yard, the twin house stood clear, glowing bright as though in celebration. Its doors hung wide open, faceless silhouettes drifted in and out, glasses in hand, moving with an air of festivity. She saw the long table laden with food, steam curling upward, faint music drifting through the air, mingling with bursts of laughter. But when she blinked, it was gone. Only the motionless, black forest remained. The daughter could no longer resist the call of her dreams. At midnight, she vanished from her room. The wife, frantic, searched the house and froze at the sight before her. In what had always been an empty room, now stood the illuminated feast. Her daughter sat upright at the table, her eyes vacant, staring ahead. Around her, the faceless guests raised their glasses, tilting their heads in silent welcome. The wife stepped forward, but the air thickened like a veil, resisting her. She saw pale, bony hands settle on her daughter's shoulders, holding her gently, yet firmly, in place. Long white fingers tightened as the mother tried to press closer. The sound of the banquet swelled, echoing through the walls, laughter entwined with the clinking of spoons, a chorus welcoming their newest guest. The husband rushed in, desperate, reaching to pull his daughter back. But when his hands met her form, he felt only a frigid emptiness, slick as ice. Her body was fading, dissolving into another world. For a fleeting instant, he saw the second house in full, its wooden walls glowing, windows alight with fire, the banquet brimming with faceless revelers. Then it all blurred away, leaving only the dark, dust-choked room and a table draped in neglect. The wife collapsed to her knees, listening. From beyond the wall, the voices pressed harder, repeating their invitation in waves. Chairs scraped against the floor, many of them, as though the table were being set for more. The structure of their own home seemed to buckle, pushed aside, as another house forced itself into being within its walls. In that moment, the family understood. They were not merely living in an old cabin. They were sharing it with another house, still standing, still full, still expanding, until the feast that had never ended was finally complete. Nay, dawn never came. Time itself seemed suspended in endless night, broken only by the jaundiced glow of a single lamp casting light over the frigid room. The wife stirred awake, only to realize she was no longer in the old creaking bed. She sat at a brightly lit banquet table, surrounded by faceless guests. The air reeked of wine, roasted meat, and burning wood, but the scents only thickened the suffocating atmosphere. The blank heads turned toward her in unison, featureless yet heavy with the weight of hundreds of unseen eyes. Through the window of this new house, she saw the outline of the old one, the home they had moved into, now sunken in shadow, hollow, drained of life. Only one figure remained there. Her husband sat slumped in the dim room, his eyes locked on the wall. He could hear every laugh, every clink of raised glasses from the other side. Within the chorus of sound, his wife's and daughter's voices rang out, familiar yet estranged, calling his name in a haunting harmony. He pressed his palm against the cold wall, and from the other side, pale hands pressed back. Tin like ice, fingers long and bony, clawed at the seams of the wood, pulling, tugging, prying open a crack. Light from the banquet spilled through, flickering like a beckoning flame. The slow scrape of a chair echoed, deliberate, preparing for one final guest. The husband staggered back, trembling, but the house did not allow escape. The walls closed in, the hallway shortened. The ceiling sank lower, pressing the breath from his chest. The attic groaned, dust drifting down like glowing cinders in the dim light. All of it drove him back toward the widening fracture, where shadow and light shimmered together like a door ajar. Through the gap, he saw his wife and daughter seated side by side, their forms fading but recognizable. Their faces, however, were dissolving into pale voids, merging with the faceless beings gathered at the table. Though empty, they tilted their heads and raised their glasses in unison, offering an invitation impossible to resist. The laughter swelled, rising, shattering, drowning out the pounding of his heart. In his final moment, he laid his hand upon the crack. The door burst wide, golden light pouring through, swallowing the last remnants of darkness. The sound of a chair scraping out one final time groaned through the air, and then fell silent. The small wooden house in Vermont sank into utter stillness. Outside, the forest lay heavy with mist, unmoving, as though no one had ever lived there at all. But if one were to stand close at night, pressing an ear to the mildewed wall, they might still hear it. The clink of spoons against glasses, the scrape of chairs sliding back, and the endless banquet echoing from the twin house, where those who chose to sit down never rose again. Nah.